I'll start with Viviana. So Viviana, you're with Language IO. You've been with the company since its very inception, I think employee number 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
And, the conversation today is really going to turn into a discussion around what does it look like as you take a customer success role from the inception of a company to where you are today. So maybe just start with a little bit of an introduction to Language IO first, and what you do, and then we'll talk more about your role and how that's evolved over time.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Language IO, and we are a software company, and we are in the multilingual customer support space. So our software enables global enterprises to communicate with their customers in any language. We have integrations with multiple CRMs to empower the support teams to essentially support customers no matter the language they speak. And we do live chat machine translations, and we also have integrations for email translation, article translation. So we're really plugged in that customer support space. We also have publicly exposed APIs, so we can really connect into a lot of other applications for our customers. And it's been a very exciting journey to be with Language IO. Absolutely.
Very cool. And so that I understand the product and what you're building and delivering, it's language translation in real time for customer success organizations. Is that so?
Correct.
You probably end up interacting with a lot of your counterparts in the CS community.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes, exactly. Which is it's very cool, I have to say. My background is actually in languages. So I was born and raised in Italy. I am bilingual. So this role is really great for me because I get to use that background that I have and work in a sense also in the translation and localization space. But because we are a software company that empowers customer support teams, a lot of the times, yes, you're completely right. Our main point of contacts are people in the same space as I am. So customer success, customer support, customer experience. So it's a nice cherry on top, I have to say. That's
very cool. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about the journey of Language IO. So when did the company start? What got it started? And you were obviously there in the early days. How did you become connected into Language IO?
Sure. So I started with the company in 2017. The company had been around for a few years before that. And I got started in a program manager role, but it was very customer facing. And my background before was in translation and localization, but also in translation technology. So I was already fairly plugged in with the technology and software side of the business as well. And so when I got started, I was essentially a program manager, but I was, again, in touch with all of our customers already in my role. So, with the years, I developed very good relationships with our customers, and my role started to grow a little bit more into kind of an account management role, right? And we got our Series A funding at the beginning, around the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. And that's when I got the opportunity to start a customer success organization from scratch, which was very exciting. I was actually coming back to work from maternity leave. So, you already have one challenge at home with your second child, and then, you're offered this opportunity. And I think it was just very special and very exciting. So
very cool, very exciting. So, so help me understand this. So, you've just had your second child, and then you come into a startup role, setting up a new department. How do you juggle all those different things? It's more of a personal question. We'll get into the workshop in a moment, but I can't imagine doing that at all.
Yeah. So a lot of deep breaths, excellent childcare, and a lot of patience. But I really think just the excitement was fueling those first few months. That's for sure. And I think just seeing that the company was already going in the direction of focusing on the customer, right? And being customer-centric, and having a board that was actually supporting the creation of these roles was just very encouraging.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to go back to 2017, I think, when you joined Language IO. And just to give everybody a sense of scale now, like what's the scale of Language IO now? Like how many employees, customers, et cetera?
Yeah. So when I joined, I believe we were 7 or 8 employees. And today we are 60, close to 60, and, you know, around 100 customers. So definitely a fairly quick growth, especially if you consider that actually right when we got our Series A, the company was still fairly small, definitely, within 20 employees, if that. So we've grown quickly.
Got it. Good. Exciting. And so when you first started, in a program management capacity, maybe talk a little bit about that, because I think what would be helpful to understand is what are some of the skills that you develop as a program manager that translate into when you evolve into customer success role and chief customer officer? So maybe take us to these early years. What did the world look like at Language IO in these early years?
Absolutely. So when I started, I was managing one side of the business, which had to do with content that is translated by human linguists. So I was kind of more in my traditional role that I had before in many other translation companies. So I was interacting with our customers that had the specific need of translating knowledge-based articles, which are, public-facing articles, obviously, and in most cases need translation by a human, not just a machine. And so I was basically guiding customers through that type of life cycle for their projects. But in doing so, I was, for one, understanding the product, right? Because a lot of what I was managing was coming direct, the content I was managing was coming directly from our integrations, right? So I had to understand how that was happening. I had to do some troubleshooting with our linguists sometimes that were working in environments that were connected to our applications. And in general, I was the face of the company for the customer for these projects, right? And as I developed those relationships, I also learned about what their needs were, right? Maybe there was something beyond what they were doing that they, were looking to do with us. Maybe they were really happy with the product and were wondering if they could use it in a different way. And so because the company was so small, obviously, we had one Slack channel basically with, the engineering team and the CEO and the CRO and everyone there, right? And so we were just bouncing off ideas very quickly, which I think is what happens, right? In that very, very early stage. And I think that's why and how I got to be involved in more strategic conversations too, right? Like, where are we going next? What about our pricing? What about our structure? What do we think is missing? And so it was really great to be able to have my voice being heard in a sense, and working for a small organization, but that was also very interested in hearing from their employees.
Yeah, makes sense. And so I think the excitement of an early stage company, and it's not for everyone. I tell folks anytime they're thinking about making that switch from big tech to a startup, if you can thrive in that chaos and uncertainty and find your way through that, then it's an exciting place to be, because there's so many opportunities to contribute in different ways. Not just you end up wearing multiple hats, no doubt. So now kind of take us through the next step of the journey, maybe closer to, 2019, 2020, as you're starting to scale up and formalize a little bit more as a company and roles start to get structured, et cetera. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So, right around that time, actually, so maybe a couple of years into me joining, I really started doing what you're saying, right? The wearing multiple hats. I actually got involved with our engineering team a little bit, joining sprint planning, sprint reviews, and just really taking a deeper peek into our product and how that worked. And again, luckily, I've always been interested in technology. I've always been pretty good at teaching things myself, and just learning pretty quickly how things work. So that was exciting too, right? And so as we're getting, closer to 2019, 2021, at that point, I'm also asked to get involved on other tasks that were more related to our other products, right? With the live translation, so the machine translation side of the business as well, which means being in touch with more and more customers at that point, right? So not just the people that were doing the more traditional translation work, but also, again, people that had other needs in their customer support organization. And so, they had agents using our tools, right? And using our product. And so that was kind of the next step, right? And at that point, I think, closer to 2020, when I went on maternity leave, I had really my hands in a lot of things, from pricing to product, to product suggestions, feature requests and things like that. So even though a lot of roles were not formalized yet at the time, it was, the responsibilities were growing. They were growing in an organic way, I will say, but you're spot on. If you can thrive in the chaos, I always say early stage startups are not for the faint of heart.
Yeah,
I love it. I mean, I always joke, I say, I don't know if I could ever work anywhere else, but I really just enjoy it. So that's kind of where we got to, closer to 2020, 2021.
got it. Very cool. Okay, so I think one of the questions I've had top of mind, I've heard it from several people who are pursuing a path similar to yours at a startup. Like when you start to formalize different functions, like how did you make the decision that customer success now needs to be a dedicated function, and we need to have someone focus on it exclusively? Like, give us a little bit of a sense for what's the scale? What are the metrics? What are the problems that you're seeing that sort of leads to a conversation in the management team that says, let's formalize CS as a function and have you take the lead on it?
Mm-hmm. See, this is where I think, there was an approach on one side where, and I love this, I love to see this, was that we really understood that a lot of the things we were doing were because of our customers. A lot of the great product that we were putting out there was also because of our customer feedback or use case or willingness to say, will you build this with us and not just for us, right? And so I think that they saw the opportunity, the company saw the opportunity there to sort of replicate that, right? And in order to do that, you do need someone who is plugged in and on the ground and understands what customers are talking about and what they need and where they're going, right? What are their goals? Like, what are they trying to achieve? And how can we continue to demonstrate our value? So on the one hand, I think that was the reason, right? And on the other hand, I think I personally feel very lucky that even the board and the investors that got involved in our Series A were really all about customer success, right? And really saw the need to have someone there. I think our CEO is probably still to this day the best CCO out there because, she really, she was on the ground and she got those first customers, right? And so, she saw it, the board saw it, and they thought that I was the woman for the job.
Awesome. Very cool. That's wonderful. So I think, and just as we've got a couple more people join us since we started. So if you're just joining us, let us know which company you're from, where you're dialing in from. And if you have questions, please go ahead and pop your questions in the chat forum. I will, since it's a small group, I'd be happy to open your line so you can ask your questions directly. So feel free to jump in at any point. Okay, so Viviana, maybe let's shift gears a little bit now to where you are in the present moment, where we talked a little bit the other day where you guys have a lot of customers, there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of data flowing through. So the infrastructure side of things, right, that you've built out at the company to support customer success. Maybe take a moment to kind of walk us through that journey on what does that look like for you today, and how, I mean, it's still obviously a growth business and early stage, so there's still a lot of messiness, which is to be expected. But help us understand a little bit more of what that looks like.
Sure, absolutely. So when I started out, we decided based on our projections and the scale of the company at the time to start with 2 customer success managers. So, went ahead and got them hired fairly quickly within the first probably 4 to 6 weeks of me starting out. Happy to report that they're still with us, which I think is super important too, because as we were saying, right, startups are not for the faint of heart. So I really love working with my team to this day. I think we've accomplished so much, but certainly when you get started, I think that's when I realized that there was still a lot that I wasn't seeing before, right? And there was still a lot of work to be done to really get us in a position where we could support the growth that we were expecting and that we did end up experiencing, right? From honestly reviewing some contracts to trying to re-engage customers that were notoriously, not very responsive, that would, still use the tool, but really not really engage with you, not really telling you what was going on, to just trying to put a structure within onboarding and what was working, what wasn't working. So there was a lot of, admin work that we had to do, a lot of scratching our heads, but I think we did really well. And in terms of tools, in the very beginning, and to this day, the tech stack of CS in an early stage startup tends to be pretty raw, right? Pretty basic. Yeah. And I will say, I think that's where we are right now, right? Where we're like at a pivoting point and we're trying to understand when is the right time to jump and add to our tech stack. I think everyone struggles with that, right? I'm a big proponent to do it sooner than later, but
yeah. I mean, our first tech stack was, I work in a go-to-market capacity. So when we started the company, the role was primarily to make sure that we bring some of the early adopter design partners to work with us, to design the product with us. And the role was primarily getting access to the right people and bringing them into a conversation with our team. And, for the first year, my CRM was a spreadsheet where I tracked the accounts and the people I was talking to at those accounts and the meetings I was having with them. Until about, 12 months later that we implemented HubSpot and got that going.
Yeah.
And I think I would say on the customer success side for us, given the scale that we're at right now, it's still pretty much manual work. Like we're tracking a lot of what our users are doing in our product through spreadsheets and emails and other sort of manual processes. So, that's okay at the early stages. As you start to scale up, then it starts to become, when the process starts to hinder your growth, that's when you start to invest in addressing some of those challenges. So maybe talk a little bit about, the metrics side of things, right? So what data do you care about in terms of understanding your users' behavior and value creation for them? And are they using the product? Are they getting value out of it, et cetera? Like, what are the different stages of the customer journey and what metrics do you care about at each stage? I think that would be helpful. So maybe let's just start with customer journey. What does the customer journey look like when they start to work with Language.io?
Yeah. And that's very interesting that you're mentioning that, because one of the things that we were focusing on initially, like I said, was onboarding, right? And what we had noticed was that customer journey was in a lot of cases kind of getting stuck in this onboarding / adoption limbo, which, it was really hard to get out of. And so I think, the first thing we did was looking at the onboarding time and really looking at, since our tool is super quick and easy to integrate, and customers can be up and running in a matter of days if they, if everything is ready to go. So, we did realize, hey, our, time to onboard should be fairly quick, right? So clearly, you have that phase of the onboarding and then you have the adoption, right? And what we have noticed, because also our tool is usage-based, so it's not, license or seat-based, it really would depend on what the customer, how ready the customer was to implement the tool, and really focusing on understanding their phase for rollout, right? So that adoption can take, up to 3 months to get up and running and to really get to the levels that they purchased. And then, after that, it's it gets into the renewal, it gets into the growth phase, right? Where when they are adopting the tool and they are stable, but potentially starting to grow, that's when you start to think about expansion, right? And then you get into the renewals, and then for example, year one, we're like, renewals great, yearly contracts, and now it's we're starting to see customers wanted longer terms. Great. So that's another thing we had to think about, right? Also because our tool being usage based, and when you have a longer contract, the time that they spend in those phases of their journey can change too.
Yeah.
Very
cool. So back to adoption, like that's the first stage, right? And that's where there's a lot of make or break, in the sense that if they there's certain triggers at which the tool starts to make sense, and it's like, all right, well, now I'm going to start using it, and then it kind of hits a steady state. But what are some of the challenges that your customers would bring to you in terms of the adoption cycle that your CS team can help with and help them overcome that? And maybe talk us a little bit through, like, what's the customer's experience when they first interact with Language IO, and your technology gets embedded into their CRM tools, so the translations start to show up. But like the adoption phase, help us a little bit understand, because I think a lot of companies actually struggle with that part of the problem.
Yeah. So I think some of the issues of, first of all, is, on the one hand, there's you always have to think about the skepticism around the technology that involves machine translation, as far as we're concerned in the space we're in, right? So it is really the work that you need to do at the sales stage, and also at the onboarding stage, to just let people know that this is great technology that can make you very, very efficient. It is still machine translation, so you still have to balance those expectations. But sometimes there is skepticism, and so even though some agents do have the opportunity to use the tool, they might not use it because they might not have a good understanding of how good the tool really is, right? And that's where you may have the challenge of, like, who are you selling to and who is using your tools, and making sure that there is information being shared with the team on the ground, right? Because sometimes you may sell to a CCO or a VP of customer success or customer experience, but then the agents are the ones using it, right? And so sometimes that's one of the issues with adoption, is that there's a link missing there. And that's where we can come in and say, do we want to have a training session? Do we want to share some material with the agents? And then, on the other hand is on the product side, they might come to you with some suggestions about how seamless or not seamless the experience may be. And that's when, again, the customer success managers can take that feedback and bring it to product, right? Because like you said, they see the tool in the CRM, and they expect the experience to mirror what they do when they communicate in their own language, right? And there's no translation happening in between.
Got it. So, and I'm just messaging Gary. I'll open the line to you in a moment. I think you asked a really good question. But before we do, so I think the point that you just made, Viviana, which is there's a difference between who made the purchase decision, who's the actual user of the product. And so bridging that is a really important part of that onboarding process. But back to the point about usage-based model, right? So I assume it's like you're buying a certain number of word translations.
Correct.
Is that how you're set up?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So let me open the line to Gary, because Gary, feel free to jump in and ask your question here. Let's see here. Okay, your line is open.
Hey, good morning.
Hi, Gary.
It just jumped out at me when you mentioned that your product was usage-based. And so it's something that I've been working to figure out also for another line of business. So I was kind of wondering, how does expansion work and renewal work when you're usage-based? But just at the end there, it sounded like Asim maybe hinted at it, that it's not per use per se, but you're buying a monthly plan, it sounds like.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. You buy a monthly or yearly plan, and you have a certain capacity, right? Certain translation capacity, and our database is able to track that usage in terms of translation usage.
Yeah.
And then based on that, we would obviously have a tracking mechanism and dashboards to say, again, is the adoption going the right way? Like, am I seeing a curve that's going up, right? That's what I always want to see. Or, I mean, sometimes is there a spike, right? And if there is a spike, is the customer aware of it? Because sometimes I will say they do have the opportunity to access self-service tools, but they might not be plugged in every day. And so that's also where we really work in that advisory role. And we say, we've noticed that you're really using the tool a lot. Have you rolled it out to an additional region? Have you maybe have you lost some native speakers, right, that we're supporting maybe part of the business? So I think we really partner with our customers to understand that, and then track that usage. So that's where we see our growth, right? And that's where we can suggest, upgrades, in a sense, right?
Just one other thing I was curious about.
Yeah.
That hit me as you were speaking about the product, which sounds very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how there's a lot of translation products running around these days.
Mm-hmm.
How does this product become specifically a CS product?
Yeah. So one of the biggest differentiators is that we do not just provide, we really don't provide the translation ourselves, like we don't own the engines, right? But what we do is we have a seamless integration within CRMs. And then the translation is being sent to an aggregate layer of various translation engines that we integrate with, right? So that's what makes it seamless. You're still in Salesforce. You are starting a live chat as an agent, right? And let's say you as an agent, you're speaking English. You don't know who's on the other side, right? Maybe the customer is in Spain. They're going to start chatting with you in Spanish, but via Language IO tools, you are not going to see the Spanish. You're going to hit the button and it's going to give you an English translation. So you're still communicating your own language and our tool does the rest, right? And bridges that gap. I think, that's a big differentiator to have those integrations, as well as the fact that, we do integrate with multiple vendors. So you're not really just getting, a Google Translate translation that you can get on the web. And you do that securely as well. So that's one of the other biggest differentiators that we have.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for discussing that.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Gary. And I'm going to go ahead and mute the line, but anybody, if you have another question, please jump in. So that was pretty interesting. And actually, as you're describing that, I think sometimes we forget how miraculous that experience is, where we can now talk to pretty much anyone, anywhere in the world, and do it in our own language and be able to communicate in that way. So really important work. You were talking about like how you want to see the trend lines over time, right? So that's essentially time series data plotted over time, so you get a sense for what direction the usage is trending. How do you do that today? Like, is it you build custom dashboards or spreadsheets, or where does the data come from? Obviously, like you have to get access to product data. And put that in front of your CS team so they can see what's going on there, and how you're thinking about how you might want to handle that in the future.
Sure. Yeah, I will say, because we are usage-based, right? Product data is like monumental for us. Yeah. So like I said, we do have our database that tracks the usage, and then we use some business intelligence tools that connect to our database and generate these dashboards. And then these dashboards are used by our customer success team as well as our customers. Now, is that enough as we scale to really understand what our customers are doing and what we need to do to grow them and retain them? Probably not, right? There's a lot of other data that, it's still in various places, typical at this stage. So I don't think it's out of the ordinary, but that's how that information is surfaced to us today.
Yeah, I read somewhere recently, in fact, that after the first year for a startup that is growing, they're typically using about 35 different SaaS products, which if I look across like where we are as a company, that's probably an underestimate, just the number of different tools we're using to do our jobs.
Yes.
So now, Viviana, I'm aware that you're not using a customer success platform at yet, something that you've considered.
Correct.
But share with folks a little bit about what's the right time to think about that? Like when's what are some of the signals that you look for and say, you know what, now's the time for us to start thinking about it and let me explore what my options are.
Sure. There's different signals, right? That at least I've identified. So first of all, I love to plan. Sometimes I plan a little too much in advance. I think my family knows this, unfortunately for them. So I did a lot of research actually already in 2022 before I thought we were even ready for a tool, because I think what's important to know is knowing the landscape, right? And especially knowing what you need. You can get into, you have to have clean data, et cetera. I mean, there are tools that kind of clean the data for you nowadays, which is good as well. But I think, I hate to say it, sometimes what it takes to give you that light bulb, going up is something fell off the wagon, you dropped the ball somewhere, you maybe missed an expansion opportunity, you missed some data, because it wasn't obvious to see, right? I think a lot of what we do is around translation. So having data about translation quality that is surfaced in a way that allows us to make decisions quickly is super important. And that's what we do with our tools as well. But sometimes, it may just take a customer churning or threatening to churn, right?
Yeah.
And coming out of the woods saying, actually, this product is not working for us. And maybe someone not being super aware that was the mood, right? Or that was the situation. So sometimes it's something that makes you reactive,
Yeah. It's actually, I mean, I think it's you're describing startup reality for most startups, which is when something breaks, that's when attention turns in that area to say, how do we fix
squeaky
it?
wheel. The squeaky wheel. I mean, it's good, right? I think it's good that you have the awareness. And then I think, sometimes it's not just a churn, sometimes it's actually the expansion opportunity, right? And so if you think that in a startup that's growing, revenue is important, right? And so it's really a missed opportunity because maybe that customer could have grown this year instead of next year. And so I think it's important to course correct. And I think it's important to do what you can with what you have. And if you put in place some processes, it doesn't really matter if they are in a Google Sheet or if they are on a Word document. I think the idea that you have a process, what you need to do. When you have the automation, when you have the tools, that's half the work, right? Because then you can say, hey, this is what I'm working with. Here's my spreadsheet. This is the data I need. How can I get it into a tool, right?
I think what you just said makes so much sense to me as a startup founder, which is first run the process manually. Then think about what's the tool to bring in. Don't try to, jump ahead and get in front of the thing by buying the tool and then recognizing that you don't actually know what the process needs to be. So that resonates a lot with me. So really, really cool. I'm curious about, Gary asked a question about renewals earlier in a usage-based setting. How does your team, like from an ownership standpoint, obviously there's a lot of shared responsibility with the sales team and the CS team, and then the product team and the CS team. Maybe touch on that a little bit. Like, is renewals a shared responsibility with the CS team, and what does that motion look like? And how do you go about the renewal contract with the client?
Yeah. So it's interesting because it seems that out there's many different schools of thought. And I'm a firm believer that ultimately there is no right or wrong. It's really what works for you today.
Yeah.
And it may not work tomorrow, right? So right now, the way it works is that our CSMs work really closely with some other team members that are on their sales. And these people are, strategic account owners, and they really take on anything on the commercial side when there is an expansion opportunity that is surfaced. So CSMs are on the ground, right? They right now they're doing onboarding. So they are also plugged into the customer experience from the very beginning. They don't just sit on calls and chat. They are really doing the work from the beginning. And so I think they know a lot about the customer, and they certainly have the pulse of the account. And I think it's great that we have this great relationship with these other team members on the sales side, because we can surface those opportunities. We can bring these other people in. Right now, they own the number, and they own sort of the tedious sometimes work of the quoting and contract negotiations, which I love to be involved on. Don't get me wrong, but I think it can sometimes overburden a CS team, right? If they're doing everything from onboarding, it's like, okay, something's not going to be done very well at that point. And you probably want the revenue part to be optimal.
Squeaky clean. Yes. Agreed.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, cool. And okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I want to understand a bit more, I think, now back to sort of your personal journey and your professional journey as an early stage, early person at a startup, and then sort of growing with it. Share a little bit about what it's like in terms of the leadership journey, right? So when you're the first person in that chaotic setting, you're doing everything yourself. Like you have, there's no choice, right? But how does that change over time?
Sure. Well, a big change is that I no longer have accounts, so which I did in the beginning, right? I was sort of the third CSM as well. I think I still love to be on the ground with my CSMs, and I need to pull myself back. It's been very interesting because I think you have a lot of imposter syndrome in the beginning, especially when you have really nothing to compare to. The role per se feels like it's different than what you did before, but then you look at your responsibilities and you think, this is what I've been doing my entire career. It just had a different name attached to it. And so I think from a leadership standpoint, as the company grows, I am trying to understand how the team will grow and how to switch from sort of like a generalist approach of, okay, I'm not going to hire just a bunch of CSMs. Let's specialize those functions, right? And so that's when you start plugging in maybe someone in CS ops, or like having a dedicated onboarding team, right? An onboarding manager or an implementation manager. So that's kind of what the next focus is going to be. I also manage customer support. So, I manage kind of the whole customer experience, and there's, thoughts I have on that side too, where, how can I grow that team in a way that isn't just, 10 support agents and how can I specialize that team and give them opportunities also to do good work that isn't just repetitive and transactional, right? And is more strategic.
Yeah, got it. Very cool. And so I think for the audience, if you have any questions, any final questions, feel free to jump in. We're gonna take this to close over the next few minutes. But I think one of the key things, Viviana, that I'm curious is, when you are hiring and building your team, which you've done, obviously, what kinds of skills do you look for in the person? Like, what do you look for that you believe is going to be a good success indicator in a customer success role?
Well, again, because we're still an early stage company, right? I really always ask that question. Sometimes it's chaos over here. How do you manage that? Some people really need the structure. Some people don't like wearing multiple hats. I also don't want to set the expectation that, hey, you're going to do the job of 7 people, right?
Yeah.
But certainly someone who kind of likes that challenge and has a history building processes and really coming in with a fresh set of eyes. I think that's another statement I've been making during interviews is, I do love that. I do love the fresh perspective. There are certain things that are standard that are great. Of course, if you have a background in translation tools, that's fantastic. If you have a background in SaaS, that's fantastic. But I think ultimately, to be successful, do you love talking to customers? Do you like digging deep and understanding what people need from our product? And can you thrive in the chaos?
That's right. Yeah, so that's a good note to take this to close with 2 startup folks here on the talking to each other and several startup folks on the call. Can you thrive in the chaos? That sounds like a good title for a book.
Yeah, I know, but the rewards are great too.
That is true.
Right.
I agree. So again, I wanted to take a moment to just thank you for your time today, for all of the insights that you've shared, for what your journey looks like, how the language IO journey's evolved over time, and from Italy to California, and the transition you've made there, and I'm just blown away that you're in a startup taking up a new role while you're managing a second baby. That's just like
I know.
A startup by itself is enough work, and I think anybody that's in a startup would appreciate the kind of effort that takes to pull together. So thank you again for your time. For everybody joining in today, if you'd like a recording of this call, it will be on our website by the end of the day tomorrow, and we'll send out a notification to anybody that registered or anybody that participated with a link. What's a good way, Viviana, for folks to reach out to you and connect with you? Where can they find you if you have any questions that they'd like to follow up on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. You can find me with my full name over there. Love to connect there. Absolutely. And then languageio.com is our website. If you're interested in knowing more about what we do, that's where you would get started.
Great. Awesome. And on that note, if you'd like to, we'd love to continue the conversation with everybody in the industry around customer success. You can find me on LinkedIn or at asim@immersa.co. Just drop me a note and I'm happy to talk to anyone that is interested in this similar conversation. Again, thank you for all of your time, and we look forward to seeing you all next week with a new special guest. So Viviana, thank you so much for joining us today. All right, we're going to wrap up.
Thank you so much, Asim.
Thank you to our guests.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.